In the 1960s, you didn't go to the world came to you. Every morning, afternoon, and Sunday evening, people arrived at your front door with things your family needed. Before the supermarket consolidated everything under one fluorescent roof. Before the internet condensed an entire high street into a device in your pocket. Before the delivery app turned a stranger into an algorithm in a van, there was a man for the milk, a man for the coal, a man for the bread, a man who sharpened your knives in the street and sent sparks flying across the pavement, a man who came every Thursday with a leather satchel, a man who came on Sunday evenings with cockles and whelks in paper tubs. These people weren't just traders. They were the skeleton of the street itself. All 20 of them have gone. Here's what we lost. 20. The window cleaner. He didn't have a van, a telescopic pole, or a uniform with a logo on it. He had a push bike. A 20-foot wooden ladder balanced across the handlebars, a galvanized bucket of cold, soapy water, and a worn chamois leather. He came once a fortnight. He'd lean the ladder against the front of the house with a confident clang of wood on brick and climb to the top with the bucket hooked over one arm. Chamois on the glass, scrim to dry it, back on the bike within 10 minutes. No paperwork, no direct debit, a shilling, 18 pence, a smart whatever the local rate was. If you weren't in, he came back. In winter, you could see his breath from the upstairs window as he worked, ladder not quite steady against the brickwork, nobody worrying about it at all. 19. The Onion Johnny. He came once a year, usually in autumn, and he came from France. The Onion Johnny was a Breton onion farmer who sailed across the English Channel and cycled the streets of Britain selling his crop door to door. He wore a dark beret. He spoke very little English. He carried strings of pink Roscoff onions braided over his handlebars, sometimes 50 pounds of them, the strings hanging down nearly to the wheel. He named his price by holding up fingers and waited. For children playing out, meeting a real Frenchman on your own front step was remarkable. He was proof that the world was larger than it looked from the end of the backyard. On the terraced streets that knew him, he is long gone. 18. The Knife and Scissors Grinder. He announced himself before he turned the corner. Either a bell or just the voice. A particular shout, unhurried, that carried 3 streets without strain. Then came the wheel. He mounted his grinding stone on a wooden cart or a modified bicycle, foot pedals driving the whetstone. When it turned, the sparks began. Orange sparks flying sideways across the pavement. Every child within 100 yards stopped and stared. I was one of them on a summer afternoon in Halifax when I must have been 8 or 9. He came down the back street and every child on the terrace materialized from somewhere. My father watched from the yard gate with his arms folded. Even he didn't speak while the sparks were flying. He sharpened knives, scissors, lawnmower blades. He could restore a carving knife that hadn't properly cut anything in 3 years. The whole operation cost a few pence and took 5 minutes. When he left, the pavement was still warm where the sparks had landed. The grinder understood the problem was never the knife. 17. Cockle and whelk man. Sunday evenings. That was his time. He appeared at the pub, pushing the door open, making his way between the tables, a flat board loaded with small paper tubs balanced in front of him. Cockles, whelks, mussels, drenched in malt vinegar and white pepper, eaten with a tiny wooden pick. Sunday evening was the hinge of the working class week. The pub was warm, the fire was in, Monday was arriving at the edges. A tub of sharp, cold seafood was the small consolation that cost next to nothing and tasted of something definite. The specific texture of that hour belongs to him. And it is gone. 16. The firewood and kindling vendor. You cannot light a coal fire with coal alone. Coal needs kindling. Dry wood that catches quickly and burns hot enough to get the coal going. Without it, you get a cold grate and a room full of smoke and a morning that has already gone wrong. Firewood vendor solved this. He came down the cobbled streets with a handcart loaded with bundles of dry timber offcuts, tied in string. You stored them in the coal shed, where they stayed dry until the fire needed starting. Every morning through a northern winter, someone in the house was crumpling newspaper, balancing sticks over it, adding small coal on top, striking a match. That moment had to be earned. He was part of how you earned it. He is so completely forgotten that most people don't know he ever existed. 15. The chimney sweep. He came once a year, usually the end of summer before the fire season started in earnest. The ritual was always the same. Furniture pushed back from the hearth, newspapers spread across the carpet, an old sheet pinned over the fireplace with a small gap for the brushes. Then the rods, screwed together section by section, going up into the dark, the scratch of the brush against the flue, the soft fall of soot into the covered grate. We sweep called Norman who came to our street every September, or thereabouts. It might have been late August some years. I couldn't say with certainty. Quiet man. He arrived, took stock, got on with it. When he left, there was still soot on everything within 6 feet of the fireplace. That was accepted. My mother used to say she could feel the chimney breathing again after Norman had been. I always thought that was exactly the right way to put it. Left a thumbprint on the doorframe before he went. On purpose. 14. The tram boy. He had a bright red post office moped and wore a navy uniform with a peaked cap. He was almost always young, 15 or 16, doing a job that carried the full emotional weight of the communication system. In the early 1960s, when very few working-class homes had a telephone, the telegram was how urgent news travelled, charged by the word, reserved for the things that mattered. A birth, a death, an accident, a safe arrival. Red moped stopped outside your gate, the street noticed. Curtains moved, children stopped. Whoever was in the house was called to the door. The knock, the envelope, the moment before opening it. The telegram arrived with gravity already attached, every single one. 13. The badge laundry collector. Once a week, a van came to collect the heavy things. Lawn bed sheets, curtains, and thick woolen blankets was a problem without a clean solution. None of it dried quickly in a terraced house in winter. The bag wash service collected the problem. A large canvas sack left at the front door, filled by the housewife, collected, returned a few days later, clean and folded by an industrial steam laundry. You paid by the bag. Many women running a household without a proper machine, it was the one task genuinely lifted from them each week. Wash day without equipment was physical work. Water carried, wrung by hand, hung everywhere, and still damp by Tuesday. That bag, bed sheets that smelled of the steam laundry, not of the kitchen, was small but real. A week's worth of impossible weight returned in order. He has been entirely forgotten, but the women who used him haven't. 12. The Better and Clean Airs Brush Man. He came to the door with a catalogue and a hold-all full of sample brushes. He represented Betterware or Clean Airs. He showed you the products, left the catalogue, came back the following week to take your order. Clothes brushes, pot scrubbers, floor polishes, mops, dusters. He was trained to be pleasant and he was good at it. Refusing felt awkward. He came every fortnight and he kept a notebook. My mother always ordered the beeswax polish. It came in a small flat tin and sat on the shelf above the sink. I never established exactly what she polished with it. Everything, as far as I could tell, but she always had one. The brushman knew this without asking. He wasn't just selling brushes. He was often the only stranger those women spoke to that week. 11. The mobile library van. It came on the same day every fortnight, parked at the same spot, and stayed for exactly 1 hour. The mobile library van served streets and estates without a branch library within easy reach. It was a converted lorry with shelves along both inside walls. Fiction, non-fiction, a children's section near the door. A librarian inside who knew the regular borrowers by name. You handed in your tickets and took out your books. 3 at a time, as a rule. The smell inside was of paper and something institutional. The warmth that public libraries always had before they started being redesigned to feel less like themselves. Many family streets had no other way of reaching a library. The van understood this and came to them. 11 down, and we haven't reached the ones your grandparents would have called truly indispensable. Before number 10, if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Proper archives, real history. Subscribe now. 10. The Coleman. He came in a lorry with a weighbridge, or in some older neighbourhoods, still a horse and cart. He wore a leather shoulder pad and a flat cap. By the time he reached your street, he was professionally black with coal dust, the colour of a man doing a physical job since before first light. Coal was measured in hundredweight sacks, 100 weight, 112 pounds of coal in a jute sack hoisted onto his back, bent double under the weight, carried through the yard gate and tipped into the bunker or cellar chute. Then he went back for the next one. In Halifax, our coal came through the back lane. There was a wooden gate in the yard wall, and the coalman knew every gate on his round. My father used to say you could tell what kind of winter was coming by how much coal you'd ordered before the end of October. 2 ton meant a mild one. 3 ton meant someone had heard something. The weight of coal has completely vanished from British life. Central heating arrived through the 1960s and 70s, and as it did, the coalman left. Street by street, lane by lane. 9. The paraffin man. He came in when the paraffin heaters went back on. Paraffin, kerosene, was the fuel for portable heaters in homes where coal only warmed one room, and the rest of the house depended on something else entirely. Esso Blue was the brand everyone knew, that particular blue label, a smell that got into the curtains and stayed through winter. He came in a small van with large metal canisters. He filled your household can from his, collected the money, moved on. You kept a spare can in the backyard. In rooms with no other heating, bedrooms, back rooms, upstairs, the paraffin heater was the difference between bearable and not. Some people still think of that smell as the smell of being warm. It tells you more about what warmth once required than any statistic can. 8. The Corona Pop lorry. Bright colours, glass bottles, and 3pence back when you returned them. Corona Soft Drink was founded in 1919 in the Rhymney Valley in South Wales. What began as a small local enterprise became one of the most recognisable weekly deliveries in working-class Britain. A lorry of glass bottles in vivid colours arriving with fizzy pop for the children. The flavours had names that sounded impossibly specific. Cream soda, dandelion and burdock, cherryade, limeade. You kept handed them over when the lorry returned, 3pence each back against the next order. It was the first recycling scheme most British children ever participated in, though nobody called it that. If this is bringing back something specific, the clink of bottles, the smell of something sweet and cold on a Tuesday morning, hit the like button now. 1 second. It helps this reach the people who remember it. Don't go anywhere. The last 7 are the ones people always remember most. 7. The ice cream van. When you heard it, that particular tinny mechanical greensleeves drifting down the street, something happened to children that can only be described as controlled panic. The search for money, the negotiation with whoever was in the house, the running, often shoeless, down the front path before it drove away to the next street, the queue at the hatch, the deliberation. And then the 99, a soft Mr. Whippy cone with a Cadbury flake pushed in at an angle, one side already starting to run. The Mr. Whippy franchise began in Britain in the late 1950s. By the 1960s, the ice cream van was a fixed ritual of summer afternoons, the chime a public announcement that something good was available and would not wait. The scarcity made the ritual. Anything you had to run for as a child was worth having. 6. The tallyman, credit draper. He came every Friday and he wore a suit. The tallyman, sometimes called the credit draper, sold clothes, bedding, and household textiles on weekly credit. He had a hold-all and a ledger, and he knew exactly what every household on his round owed him. He came to collect the weekly instalment and, if you were ready, to show you what else he had. This worked because most working-class families had no access to formal credit. The tallyman was there on Friday with a coat you needed and an arrangement you could manage. A man used to call at our house whose name I can't now place. I must have been 7 or 8, and he seemed enormous to me, though he was likely ordinary enough in size. He sat in the front room with my mother. They discussed what she could that week, whether it was a good week or a tighter one. She never missed a payment. I know because she told us so later, when we were old enough to understand what that meant. She was quietly and completely proud of it. The tallyman carried debt and dignity and a ledger that kept both in careful balance. 5. The football pools collector. Every Tuesday or Wednesday he came to collect the coupon. The pools, Littlewoods, Vernons, Copes, were the national lottery before the national lottery existed, run entirely on foot. You filled in the coupon at the kitchen table, predicting football results for Saturday. You folded it, the collector came to the door, took it, gave you a receipt. Littlewoods Pools was founded in 1923 by John Moores, who started the enterprise with £1 and 4 colleagues. By the late 1960s, an estimated 14 million people participated every week, roughly 1 in 3 of the entire adult population of Britain. The collector was a local man with a local round. If you'd had a win, or even a small one, he often knew before you did. You filled in the coupon because it was Tuesday, and your father always did, and it gave the Saturday results a small stake that made them matter. The collector came, and the week went on. For the man from the Prue. He came on a Thursday. He was never late. The man from the Pru was the collector for the Prudential Assurance Company's industrial branch, a division of the business that had been selling weekly premium life insurance to working-class families since 1854. Not annual directs, weekly collections. In person, at the door, cash in a leather satchel. He had a collecting book, policy number, weekly premium, any arrears. He accepted what you had ready, wrote in the book, tore off a receipt, said a few words. The policy paid out on death, usually enough for a decent funeral. Keeping up with the Pru was a matter of principle. To fall behind on the burial policy was a specific kind of failure, felt accordingly. The man from the Pru had seen the inside of too many kitchens to need any of this explained. He collected what there was to collect, and he didn't make it harder than it needed to be. 3 left, and these 3 are the ones most woven into the daily texture of what it actually felt like to live in a 1960s British street. Don't go anywhere. 3. The bread man. He came in the morning before the day had properly started. The bread van, usually a small Ford or Bedford in the livery of a local bakery, did its round through the terraced streets before 8 o'clock. He knocked. You came to the door, took for the rolls, paid him, and he moved on. The bread was warm if you timed it right. Not supermarket warm. Actually warm, a white bloomer from a proper baker's oven, still giving off heat when it arrived on the step. You could cut the first slice immediately and the steam came up from the cut. Hovis ran bread vans across of industrial Britain. The round baker knew which houses took 2 loaves and which took 1. He knew when a family had gone away because the bread went uncollected. He came every morning and he paid attention. That was the job. 2. The milkman. He was the first sound of the morning. The clink of glass bottles in a metal crate. The crunch of his step on the front path. The small, precise sounds of pint bottles set down on the step. This happened at 5:30 in the morning, or 5 depending on the round. Every single day. Rain, ice, snow, the dark of January. The milkman came regardless. He drove a float and an electric vehicle nearly silent except for a faint hum and the bottles, and he delivered for a local dairy. In Halifax it was often the Co-op or Unigate. You left the empties out and he collected them. If you needed an extra pint, you left a note the night before. I used to watch him from the bedroom window sometimes when I was 5 or 6 and couldn't sleep. The float moved so slowly it seemed to be drifting down the dark street on its own. He never needed a light. He knew every step of his round completely. My mother communicated with him entirely by note. He knew when we were away because she'd left a note 2 days before. He knew what occasions required orange juice. Over years, he knew more about the rhythm of the household than most people who ever came through the front door. By the mid-1970s, the vast majority of British homes received doorstep milk delivery. The UK had the highest rate in the world. Today, it is somewhere below 3%. 3%. 1. The rag and bone man. He came with a horse. That is the first thing to say about him, because it deserves saying plainly. A horse-drawn cart moving slowly over the cobblestones of a residential street in the north of England in 1963. The rhythm of iron shoes on the slow creak of the cart. The smell of horse, warm and patient, in the middle of an ordinary terraced street on an ordinary morning. He called as he came. That particular cry every child of the era recognizes, even if they can't reproduce it. Rag bow. Sometimes a bell, the voice carried, "You brought him rags." Old clothing, worn beyond mending. Scrap metal. He paid nothing, or next to nothing. A donkey stone for the step. A goldfish in a bag for the children. A few pennies. What he actually was a recycler. Rags went to paper mills and felt factories. Metal went to scrap merchants. He was a closed loop 60 years before anyone used that term. Steptoe and Son, BBC, 1962 to 1974, was about a rag and bone man and his son. One of the most watched programs in Britain. Even as it aired, the trade it depicted was already going. The horse was going. The cart was going. The cry was fading. In Halifax, when I was very young, it must have been 1963 or 1964, I couldn't say for certain, there was a rag and bone man whose horse I was convinced was the largest animal in existence. I was probably 4. The horse was probably ordinary. He stopped at the end of our street, and I stood at a safe distance while my mother handed over a bundle of old curtains. The man gave me a goldfish in a bag. I don't know what we called it or what happened to it. But I remember that horse. The breath coming out of its nose in the cold. The enormous patience of it. standing completely still in the middle of the road while everything went on around it. That is what we had, and it is gone. The milkman knew when you were away. The coalman knew your yard. The man from the Prue knew what your policy was worth. The pools collector knew what you'd predicted on Saturday. The breadman knew whether you preferred a bloomer or a batch. None of them needed an app. None of them needed a database. They knew because they came to your door every week and paid attention. Not something you replicate with a delivery slot, something that simply ended. If you remember any of these, subscribe. There are more where this came from.